Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore. In his film, released just a few months before the 2016 election, Greg Palast predicted that Donald Trump would steal that election and go on to win. I think he may have been more surprised than anybody when his film turned out to be making a correct prediction. But here he is, and he's going to join us to tell us why and how he thinks it was done. Thanks for joining us, Greg.
Glad to be with you, Paul.
All right, so just quickly, Greg is an investigative reporter. He works with the Rolling Stone, the Guardian newspaper. He's also the author of the New York Times bestsellers, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. And he's got a new film out based on that book, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. He's also the author of the books Armed Madhouse and Vulture's Picnic. Now, we've heard a lot about voter fraud. But the voter fraud is like this thing, people voting twice, and you've kind of debunked that.
That's exactly how they get away with it. They yell voter fraud, and this is how you get systems like this cross-check system, and like there's alien voters, et cetera, and there's all this hysteria about 1 million people swimming the Rio Grande to vote for Hillary. So that's all illustrated in our film as well, and we call it the Hysteria Factory. Here's the clip.
So how do they get away with it, creating these obstacles to voting? Easy. The Kochs and their minions, like the Heritage Foundation, they yell voter fraud, and the media eats it up.
Voter registration fraud. Voter fraud.
Voter fraud. Fraud.
Voter fraud.
Voter fraud. Vote fraud.
Voter fraud.
To sell the nonsense of mass voter fraud, they've built a hysteria factory. They claim there are millions of dead voters.
Adolf Hitler. Yes, that name has now appeared on an Ohio voter registration card.
Felon voters, ghost voters, alien voters.
In 2010, there were approximately 50 Somalians stealing my vote.
Listen to me! They're not human! Take a seat, everyone! They're here already! Join me!
And now, double voters.
Probably over 1 million people that voted twice in this election.
Okay, so who's paying for all this?
Yeah, vote theft isn't cheap, and to create a whole hysteria factory to convince the public that there is a massive amount of voter fraud, you need a very, very expensive multi-million-dollar operation involving think tanks, involving whether it's Fox News or even, you'll see these reports, by the way, on NBC and PBS. You know, it's not just the Fox News right-wing stuff. They all get planted with these stories of the fraudulent voters. Who's behind setting this up, okay? So we talk about, there's, you know, if you look at places like Heritage Foundation and other think tanks and kind of controlled media, but who's the money? We follow the trail back and we find two brothers named Charles and David Koch. And there's a little story, and some of the evidence I got on them comes from a little rat who you'll see in this film about the Koch brothers.
Okay, here's the clip.
20 years ago, David and Charles Koch were the richest guys you've never heard of. They got their money the old-fashioned way. They stole it from the Indians, like this. The Osage Indians, poorer than dirt, let the Kochs truck away oil from their Oklahoma reservation. Koch would pay for 90 barrels of oil, but Charles told their truckers to take 100. One of Koch's buddies told us that when he asked Charles why the billionaire would skim $3 a week from some poor Indian family, Koch said,
"I want my fair share, and that's all of it."
$3 a week per Indian added up to over $1 billion for the Kochs. The FBI and federal prosecutors wrote up a criminal indictment that could put Charles behind bars for theft and racketeering. But the Kochs got their buddy, Kansas Senator Bob Dole, to get the prosecutor replaced with a crony, and the criminal indictment went poof. The Kochs then gave the senator $100,000, which federal authorities made him give back. In 1995, Koch Oil was charged with 312 criminal counts of dumping 3 million gallons of oil sludge into rivers in 6 states. Rather than comply with the law, they decided to buy control of the entire U.S. Congress to change the law. How? The answer came from an insider who called me to rat on Charles and David, their little brother Billy. Triad? Holy mama! Triad was the secret conduit of those millions to a front called Coalition for Our Children's Future. The children ran ads linking Democrats to child molesters, wife beaters, and they accused one Democrat of being Jewish. Boy, the smear worked, and the Koch Republicans took control of the 105th Congress.
If Koch Industries had secretly funded Triad, then the brothers had committed a go-to-jail crime. At the time, it was illegal for corporations to grease political campaigns. Doesn't matter. In the case of Citizens United, the Supreme Court decriminalized campaign contributions by corporations.
Like ISIS, Inc. and Manson and Company. Billy Koch also told me that his brothers had put up over $75 million to set up a series of think tanks and front groups, including Citizens for a Sound Economy, which the Kochs morphed into Freedom Works, which drafted the demands of a group of cross-dressers called the Tea Party. Their first target, eliminate the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the pollution police, giving the Kochs such a hard time. The Kochs also fund the Heritage Foundation, which promotes the mass purge of voter rolls. And the Heritage Foundation's latest crusade? Kansas Interstate Crosscheck. I get bad penny on the case. Connect Mr. Crosscheck Kobach
Okay, pay attention.
and the brothers Koch.
Koch brothers. They've hired Whitney Ball to run their money funneling outfit, Donors Capital Fund, State Policy Network, Heritage Foundation, over a million of American Immigration Reform, Delancey.
And you would think that Jim Crow rose from the dead.
Delancey, $100,000 in legal
Kansas
for a bill
cross-check.
called SB 1070, which is an unstopped Stokowski, John Ashcroft, True Reporting, Anti-Immigration Donors Trust. Over $1 million to Numbers USA. 100,000. Farmers Branch, Texas. Chris Kobach. Got that?
So the Kochs shoved a pile of cash to Donors Trust, which gave a cool million to Numbers USA, which dropped 100 grand on Farmers Branch. And that's the mystery money that went to Kobach. So Kobach's just another spider in the Koch web, taking their cash, and now he's bleaching the voter rolls for the Kochs.
Okay, so here's in some ways what I think is the real question. Why the hell aren't Clinton and the Democrats screaming blue murder? Why don't they expose this? Why don't they denounce this? Why are they so acquiescent with it? It reminds one of Gore in 2000, where he throws in the towel rather quickly, doesn't want to fight it out over Florida. And there's plenty of evidence here that you've and others have
Well,
and they're not saying a word.
Look, back in Florida, I'm the guy that uncovered that thousands of black men were called felons. And in fact, their only crime was voting while black, but they were removed from the voter rolls, and that elected George Bush. In fact, I got a cartoon in the film about that. But so Gore knew about it. I know Gore knew about it. I got the inside word from his organization that when my story was about to break in the U.S., because it's already been shown at the top of the BBC Nightly News, and Gore was warned off, personally warned off by Warren Christopher, don't touch this stuff. Your career is toast if you can complain and undermine the American system, good or bad. Gore is now almost a billionaire. He's got the Nobel Prize. And
just had a nice little meeting with Trump and Trump's daughter Ivanka.
Yeah, I mean, so you know, he's got a pretty good booby prize for agreeing to take the dive to the mat. And now, this time, here you have another problem for Hillary Clinton and the Democratic establishment. They stole votes with both hands during the primary against Bernie Sanders. Their hands are not clean. And in state after state where I go, I see the Democratic establishment removing this, going after the same voters, the black voters, the Latino voters, the student voters, the progressives, because you'd have a very, very different Democratic Party if those voters got to vote. So they don't want those voters to vote. And we talked in the film about those placebo ballots, the provisional ballots as they're called. Well, there were 1 million provisional ballots never counted in California.
That these votes likely would have gone to Sanders, which is why you would have had a different Democratic Party.
Yeah, different Sanders. And throughout the nation, you see progressive forces within the Democratic Party who suddenly end up short in primaries because the votes aren't counted. So the Democrats are old hands at vote suppression and the attack on the minority voter and low-income voters. I saw the worst cases in New Mexico, okay, and you know, where the Democratic Party has complete control. And so they don't even mind losing some elections if they don't lose control of the party. So this is I think one of the very, very big problems is that they do it too, but generally in the primaries.
And there seems to be another reason too, which I think partly affected Gore and Clinton too, and they even articulate it in some way, how quickly Clinton had to come out and say, we respect the results. And even on Joe Stein's recount, they were very wary of getting involved. This idea of defending a very rotten system, on the other hand, they need to defend it, because if you start opening a Pandora's box, you're right, you don't know where it leads.
There's another thing. These people are the system, and they have to defend their system. Just like in the book Darkness at Noon, you know, you read that the followers of Stalin were singing his praises and the praise of the Communist Party while they are walking to their own executions, because their life was invested in this system. Hillary Clinton was created by this rotten system, okay? And let me tell you, her husband's career was launched by the Democratic Leadership Council, the DLC, which was funded by $100,000 from the Koch brothers. So they're part of that system, and they can't bring that system down by challenging it. And so Hillary Clinton, for example, said, I will respect the results of the election, even when they're clearly phony. She wouldn't back the so-called recount, which, as I said, is the count of the uncounted votes in Michigan. And the judge, ultimately, a federal judge, finally said, this count has got to stop, because Jill Stein of the Green Party, you can count the votes 100 times, Ms. Stein, you can't win. We need Hillary Clinton is the aggrieved party. She must come in and say, count those votes. And I said there's 75,000 votes with her name on them that she did not want counted. She wouldn't do it because that would be to attack something even more important than winning the presidency. And that's the entire system that created the Clintons and created Trump and created this fake monstrosity we call a U.S. electoral system. When Joe Biden said our electoral system is the envy of the world, I'm thinking he's only been to Kazakhstan then, because when I'm in London for the BBC, when I'm in Berlin for ARD, their giant station there, when I'm in Buenos Aires for the big southern South American stations, they are both laughing and terrified of what our system's going to come up with next. No one thinks our system works. When I did the story, The Steal of Florida, with wiping out black men, calling them felons, and it was fake, the rest of the world got that story on page 1 in The Guardian, top of the nightly news, BBC, all over the world, everywhere but the United States. In fact, if it weren't for Real News Network, I'm not sure much of it would have finally made it through that electronic Berlin Wall. So the rest of the world knows, and they're scared. But one thing that's amazing to me always, even when their personal interests are at stake, the elite circles its wagon, all their wagons, and defends their crowd. Because in the end, it's one little group. Like, you know, there's that picture at Trump's wedding with Hillary and Bill smiling with him. It's one little crowd and one little club.
All right, thanks for joining us, Greg.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.